Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another week of housing and settlement. Please mark your attendance if you haven't done so already by scanning the QR code in front of you, or by entering the numeric code below the QR code. This week we'll have a discussion on, well, considering that housing and settlement is a major issue, um, it's it shouldn't be it shouldn't be then it is only natural that is housing and settlement is at the forefront or is a central or key element in our in planning, especially in planning documents and policies. So this week we'll have a bit of a look. We'll have a look at that at how housing is um, at how housing is portrayed, or how um, we'll have a look at housing's role in the planning documents, or how much thought has housing been given in our planning documents, and what other policies or uh, plans or documents that support that train of thought, or that represents the importance of housing and settlement in planning. So, without further ado, I'm going to stop my screen right now, and I'd like to invite the presenting group to initiate our discussion this morning. So I've already enabled the share screen function. So you can start your presentation at any time you're ready. Thank you very much.
Do you see my screen?
Yes.
Oke. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, Pak Nanda and friends. Today we are from Group 7. We will present about housing and settlement in planning product. And for the group members, and they are Nesa and me. And for the table of contents, our presentation, they are housing and settlement in the spatial plan, housing and settlement in the development plan, housing and settlement plan documents, and linkage of spatial plans and housing and settlement plans. And for the background, data in 2014 show that the residential backlog is still around 7.6 million, and the houses are unfit for habitations as many as 3.4 million. And both indicators are influenced by various factors. Among other things, problems of land availability and administrations, funding and housing finance, licensing, institutions, and infrastructure support. And it is estimated that these issues and challenges will continue on a certain scale in line with population's growth and the dynamics of the growing social and economic conditions of the community. To solve the problems of housing and settlement areas, the government needs to prepare housing and settlement plans so that housing development and settlement areas can be more focused. And based on UUD 1945 pasal 28H, UU nomor 1 tahun 2011, UU nomor 20 tahun 2011, dan PP nomor 14 tahun 2016, the objective of housing and settlement plan is every Indonesian person or family or household occupies a livable house. And for the settlement environmental management plan based on UU number 23 year 2014 for the sub-concern settlement area, central government determinations of the settlement area system, structuring and improving the quality of slum settlement in the National Strategic Area or KSN, and structuring and improving the quality of slum areas with an area of 15 hectare or more. And for the provincial government, structuring and improving the quality of slum settlement area with an area of 10 hectare to less than 15 hectare. And for regency or city government, issuance of permits and constructions and development of residential area, structuring and improving the quality of slum area with an area of less than 10 hectare. And for the sub-consular housing and slum area, the regency or city government preventions of housing and slum settlement areas in regency or cities. And based on UU number 1 year 2011, it stated that preventions of the growth and development of slum housing and slum settlement includes irregularity and low building density, poor conditions of public infrastructure, facilities and utilities, decreases in the quality of houses, housing and settlement, as well as infrastructure, facilities, and public utilities. And for the prevention is implemented through supervision and control and community empowerment. And supervision and control is conducted in conformity with licensing, technical standards, and functional eligibility through periodic inspections in accordance with the provisions of laws and regulations. And for community empowerment conducted with stakeholders in the housing and settlement areas through assistance and information services. And it's also stated about quality improvement is carried out through restorations, rejuvenations, and resettlement. Restorations is an effort to improve, or it can also be carried out through the reconstructions of residential areas to make them habitable. And for rejuvenations is an effort to create better conditions for houses, housing settlement, and residential environment with the aim of protecting the safety and security of residents and the surrounding community. And in order to rejuvenate an area, it is first necessary to provide shelter for the affected people. Rejuvenations must produce better quality houses, housing and settlement than before. And for resettlement is carried out if the existing slum locations is a location that is not designated for residential areas according to RT/RW, or is a location that is prone to disaster and can cause danger to people who inhabit the area or locations. And resettlement is an effort to move the community from the existing locations carried out by the support of the government and local government, which also determine the locations for resettlement by involving the role of community. And for the housing and settlement and spatial plan will be explained by Nesa.
Housing and settlement aspects are regulated in the guidelines for the preparation of special plans, namely PP nomor 26 tahun 2008 concerning guidelines for the preparation of RT/RW and Permen RTR nomor 16 tahun 2018 concerning guidelines for the preparation of RDTR and city or regency zoning regulations. In PP nomor 26 tahun 2008 concerning guidelines for the compilation of RT/RW, it is explained that residential areas are part of the environment outside protected areas, both in the form of urban and rural areas that function as a residential or residential environment and a place for activities that support life and livelihood. The criteria for allotted residential areas are located outside the areas designated as disaster-prone areas, having access to community activity centers outside the area, and or have complete supporting infrastructure, facilities, and utilities. Zoning regulations for designated residential areas are prepared by taking into account the determination of the building envelope, determining the architectural theme of the building, determining the completeness of the building, and the environment, as well as determining types and conditions of permitted building use. According to Permen ATR nomor 6 nomor 16 tahun 2018 concerning guidelines for the preparation of RDTR and city or regency zoning regulations, it is explained that settlements are part of the residential environment consisting of more than one housing unit that has infrastructure, facilities, public utilities, and has other supporting activities in urban areas or rural areas. And housing is a collection of houses as part of a settlement, both urban and rural, which is equipped with infrastructure, facilities, and public utilities as a result of effort to fulfill a livable house. There are several zoning regulated in the document, one of which is the housing zone. The purpose of zoning housing is to provide land for residential development with varying densities. Broadly speaking, a housing zone is a zone that can be broken down into very high, medium, low, and very low density housing. If needed, it can be further detailed into flats, duplex, row houses, single houses, parks, and so on. And this is the table of residential zone classification in RDTR. There are two types of housing and settlement in the development plan, which are RPJP, which stands for Rencana Pembangunan Jangka Panjang, and RPJM, that stands for Rencana Pembangunan Jangka Menengah, which can be divided into two parts, namely the national and regional part. RPJPN is an elaboration of the objectives for the establishment of the Indonesian state government as stated in UUD tahun 1945 in the form of a vision, mission, and direction of national development. RPJPN is a national development planning document for a period of 20 years. RPJPN for 2005 to 2025 is regulated in UU nomor 17 tahun 2007. The implementation of the 2005 until 2025 national RPJPN is divided into stages of development planning in the 5-year periodization of the national RPJM. In the national RPJP, housing and settlements are discussed in general conditions. With the increase in population, the need for housing by 2020 is estimated to reach more than 30 million units, so that the need for housing per year is estimated to reach 1.2 million units. Vision and development direction. Housing and settlement development is directed at the implementation of sustainable, adequate, decent, and affordable housing development with people's purchasing power. The implementation of independent housing and settlement infrastructure development capable of generating potential financing from the community and the capital market, creating employment opportunities, and increasing equitable distribution of development. The implementation of housing development and settlement infrastructure that takes into account the function and balance of the environment. Direction, stages, and priorities, fulfillment of housing needs that are equipped with supporting infrastructure and facilities for the entire community, supported by a long-term and sustainable, efficient, and accountable housing financing system so that the city without slum settlements can be realized. Regional RPJP to be discussed is the Rembang Regency RPJPT, which refers to Rembang Regency Regional Regulation Nomor 1 tahun 2010 concerning the 2005 until 2025 Rembang Regency Regional Long-Term Development Plan. Central Java Province RPJPT is a regional development planning document for a period of 20 years from 2005 until 2025. In the regional RPJP, housing and settlements are discussed in regional general conditions. Most of the rural communities in fulfilling their needs for housing are fulfilled independently, which is carried out in mutual cooperation. Most of the housing procurement is carried out by the community themselves, and a small part of the rest is provided by the housing developers. And the development of the population of Rembang Regency, which continues to increase significantly. Direction stages and priorities, the realization of the availability of adequate housing through housing construction, housing rehabilitation, and the fulfillment of housing needs, as well as the formation of a healthy housing environment, increasing the fulfillment of housing needs and the creation of healthy, safe, comfortable, and sustainable residential environment in accordance with its designation and function through growing and developing potential financing from community self-help, housing microcredit, and equitable development of basic housing infrastructure. The 2020 until 2024 RPJMN will affect the achievement of the development targets in the RPJMN, where Indonesia's per capita income will reach a level of welfare equivalent to an upper middle income country that has better infrastructure conditions, quality human resources, public services, and people's welfare. The target of the RPJMN is to create an independent, advanced, just, and prosperous Indonesian society through accelerating development in various fields by emphasizing the development of a strong economic structure based on competitive advantage in various regions, supported by quality and competitive human resources. Housing and settlements are discussed in the sixth agenda of the national RPJM, namely strengthening infrastructure to support economic development and basic service, namely basic service infrastructure, discuss settlements issues related to providing access to adequate, safe, and affordable housing and settlements, such as providing limited access to adequate, safe, and affordable housing and settlements, low capacity of regions, managers, and implementing institutions for the development of basic settlement services. Urban infrastructure, which discusses about the settlements issues related to providing access to housing and adequate, safe, and affordable settlements in cities. The rapid population growth in urban areas due to natural growth and urbanization has led to an increase in the need for housing in cities. However, limited land is a crucial challenge faced in the efforts to fulfill decent and affordable housing. The imbalance between supply and demand for land causes high land prices. The need for low-income people to live near the place of work causes people to live in unsuitable housing, where some of them occupy slum and illegal settlements. The regional RPJM to be discussed is Java Provincial RPJMD, which refers to Perda Provinsi Jawa Timur nomor 7 tahun 2019 concerning the East Java Provincial RPJMD for 2019 until 2024. The RPJMD is a document that describes the vision, mission, and programs of the elected regional heads and deputy heads. In the regional RPJM, Housing and settlements are discussed in general description of regional conditions based on PP nomor 2 tahun 2018 concerning minimum service standards and regulation of the Minister of Public Works and Housing regarding technical standards for minimum service standards for public works and public housing. It is stated that the types of basic services at the provincial government include provision and rehabilitation of houses that are suitable for habitation for victims and provincial disasters, and facilitating the provision of livable houses for communities affected by the relocation of the provincial government's program, and problems and strategic issues. In order to realize the implementation of proper and sustainable housing infrastructure, several problems are still constrained, including the inadequate achievement of basic housing infrastructure, which is influenced by several things, including the high backlog of houses, the low level of fulfillment of decent and affordable housing needs, and the decline quality of settlements so that urban slum areas grow. On the other hand, there are still many uninhabitable housing conditions that require handling, especially in poverty pockets and coastal areas. It's going to explain by Sekar.
The next one will be housing and settlement plan documents. They are RP4D, RP3, RP3KP, SPPIP, and RPKPP. The first one is Rencana Pembangunan dan Pengembangan Perumahan dan Permukiman di Daerah atau RP4D. The preparations of RP4D refers to the regional long-term development plan and the provincial, regency, or city spatial planning (RTRW), which specifically regulates housing space and settlement areas and its various follow-ups. And there are three RP4D based on level plan. They are RP4D province, RP4D city, RP4D regency. And for RP4D province, for the delineations is settlement areas within the provincial spatial structure and across regions within the province. And for the mapping scale, adjusted to the provincial RTRW, and for time period, proposed 15 years and elaborated into 5 years plans and annual plans. And for RP4D city, the delineations is settlements within the administrative area of the city, mapping scale adjusted to the city RDTR for time period, proposed 10 years and elaborated into a 5-year implementations plan and an annual implementations plan for the first 5 years. And for RP4D regency, the delineations is settlement in urban areas with a high level of settlement development, and for the mapping scale adjusted to the regency RDTR, and for time period proposed 10 years and elaborated into a 5-year implementations plan and an annual implementations plan for the first 5 years. And the second one is RP3KP or Rencana Pembangunan dan Pengembangan Perumahan dan Kawasan Permukiman. RP3KP is a general planning document for the implementations of housing and settlement areas that is coordinated and integrated with cross-sectoral and cross-administrative areas. And for the guidelines for the preparations of this document are regulated in Peraturan Menteri PUPR nomor 12 tahun 2014. And the third one is the SPPIP and RPKPP. SPPIP and RPKPP are policies, strategies, programs, and settlement development activities based on urban areas in accordance with the spatial plan document. And for SPPIP is a strategy that becomes a reference for the development of settlement and urban settlement infrastructure and is the main tool for the local government to direct the development of settlement and urban settlement infrastructure. And this document is prepared based on the policy and strategy directions contained in RTRW and RPJPD, and the strategies and program that are output of SPPIP are presented on a 1 in 25,000 scale spatial map, and in the event that the regency or city concerned doesn't yet have a map of that scale, a minimum scale of 1 in 50,000 can be used. And for RPKPP is an elaboration of SPPIP in the form of a strategic program actions plan to address settlement problems and development of settlement infrastructure in priority areas in urban areas. And for the depths of the technical plans set out in this document are at a scale of 1.1 in 5,000 and 1 in 1,000. And its applications at PKPP can take the form of zoning or area revitalizations. And for the linkage of SPPIP and RPKPP, starting from the scope of SPPIP, which is divided into two, namely the regency or city scale and the priority settlement area scale. What is directly related to RPKPP is SPPIP at the scale of priority settlement areas, where from the strategy and program direction in the SPPIP priority settlement area scale becomes a reference in the formulations of area development programs and area development activities contained in the RPKPP. And for the strength and weakness of housing and settlement plan documents, for the strength, housing and settlement planning documents provide benefits not only to the government but also to stakeholders in the housing and settlement areas as well as the community. For the example, regional stakeholders obtain an overview of the prospect of the development of housing and settlement areas in their area. And there is a clear reference to efforts and priorities for handling problems in housing and settlement areas in the regions, and the availability of a strategic basis for the implementations and management of housing and settlement areas in the regions in accordance with current needs, priorities, as well as anticipations of regional development both cross-sectorally and across regions. And availability of policies for handling housing and settlement area for the poor and low income or MBR, which are expected to accommodate existing needs as well as potential development needs in coming year as a form of anticipating problems. And obtaining a policy directions for the implementations of housing and settlement areas, which can then become a basic reference for the preparations of programs and activities related to the housing and settlement areas in the regions, whether they come from the central, provincial, and city or agency. And the last one, obtaining support from housing and settlement area stakeholders who have been involved in the socialization process and identifications of housing and settlement area problems in the regions. And for the weakness, in the RP3KP, sometimes a document that accommodate housing regulations and settlement area is needed that cannot be included, especially regarding operationalizations of the plan. Example related to this are the rules regarding the minimum weight of housing, roads built by developer or independently, the minimum land area for one house unit for a simple house, or the specifications of house building that are in accordance with local wisdom in the area. And these matters can be accommodated in regional regulations concerning the implementations of housing and settlement area according to the needs of each regions. And the next one is the linkage of spatial plans and housing and settlement plans. And for RP4D or RP3KP is the elaborations and filling of spatial planning, especially housing and settlement zones. So the position of RP4D or RP3KP is under RTRW, and compared to other spatial planning products such as RDTRK or RTRK, this RP4D or RP3KP can be compared to RDTRK or RTRK due to its technical substance. And however, in this case, RP4D or RP3KP only discusses housing and settlement and related facilities or infrastructure. And in the context of spatial planning, RP4D is an elaboration of RTRW in the housing and settlement sector. RP4D includes a plan for handling the housing and settlement sector, but related to improving environmental quality, revitalizing or optimizing areas, as well as developing new areas equipped with basic infrastructure and facilities, including implementation priorities and plans for investment needs. Meanwhile, RP3KP refers to the latest laws governing housing and settlement, namely UU nomor 1 tahun 2011 on housing and settlement areas and UU nomor 26 2007 concerning spatial planning. And RP3KP prepare based on the RTRW. And the substance and use of RP3KP includes identifications of integrated, harmonious, and balanced structuring of infrastructure and facilitates the housing and settlement sector as a binding document. And for the example of the linkage of spatial plan and housing and settlement planning documents is RP3KP Kabupaten Sidoarjo, that it is stated that population's growth in RP3KP Kabupaten Sidoarjo based on the reference result of populations analysis in the RT/RW Sidoarjo Regency. In addition, in the development structure plan and housing and settlement areas, it is said that the type and character of housing related to the locations and intensity can be developed based on the spatial designations contained in RT/RW of Sidoarjo Regency. And another example of the linkage is RP3KP Provinsi DKI Jakarta. There is stated about the Waste Jakarta City Settlement Development Direction, and in the discussions of settlement areas, apart from developing a settlement area plan in the West Jakarta Administrative City, there are also office areas and mixed areas. The development of settlement areas in the office area development plan includes the applications of the super block concept in the West Primary Center, Grogol, Tanjung Duren, Selipi, and Palmerah areas, and planning for the development of office, trade, service, and mixed area, including the constructions of office facilities and flats along with facilities and development of green open space. Directing the development of mixed area to help increase the capacity of the populations that is developed vertically, and the development of one product, one village in mixed area directed at industry, non-polluting and environmentally friendly housing. And its settlement development direction is based on RT/RW Provinsi DKI Jakarta tahun 2010 until 2030. And in RP3KP Provinsi DKI Jakarta also there is Center Jakarta City Settlement Development Directions, and in the discussions of settlement areas, apart from developing a settlement area plan in the Central Jakarta Administrative City, there are also trade and mixed areas. Development of settlement areas in the trade area development plan, namely the development of multifunctional areas with international standards in Gambir, Tanah Abang, Sawah Besar, Senen, and Kemayoran. And meanwhile, in mixed areas, one of the plan is the development of mixed area by making land use more effective in Senen, Kemayoran, Johar Baru, and Tanah Abang district. And it's also based on RT/RW Provinsi DKI Jakarta tahun 2010 atau 2030. And I think that's all from group 7. Thank you for your attention. Do you have any questions?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, ladies, for your very informative presentation, and for initiating this morning's discussion session. I think in the last in the last few slides, we can see that the majority of the urban fabric is, of course, housing and settlement. So physically or spatially, we can see that it is a predominant feature, or it is a predominant land. It's the most dominant land use in the urban regional fabric. So ultimately, it does require a lot of thought and attention into how this element is integrated spatially and, of course, administratively. I'd like to invite everyone who has a question or a comment to come forward. You can either raise your hand, or you can unmute yourselves immediately. Thank you. Well, um, I'd like to forward a question that is more general. So it's not this question is not addressed to the group specifically, but to everyone or anyone that can respond. How do you think, or how effective is it? How effective are the plans and documents that um, how effective are the plans and documents that pertains to housing and settlement uh, tackle or solve housing and settlement issues in urban areas?
Maybe I'd like to try and answer, sir.
Sure, go ahead.
I think in general, the plans are not exactly flawed, but I think what needs to be improved is the supervision and control of the implementation, because I think the plan in general can already help. But I think a lot of the implementation needs improvement, because a lot of times in regards to housing programs, many of the incentives are not carried out well, or uh, there are no long-term supervision on whether they work or not and what needs to be improved uh, when the program is already being implemented. So I think in general, they just need a lot more supervision from the government and a lot more controls to make sure that the plan does work effectively in the long run, and not just in the initial implementation.
Excellent, excellent input. Would anybody like to would anybody like to counter or support that response? Does everybody agree then that the programs are? It's good to know that the programs are not flawed inherently, but there are portions of the implementation stage that we can still improve upon. Does anybody have a different take or a different opinion? No? Well, I think in general, not just in housing and settlement programs, um, but any development programs and or other programs that are development related um, tend to be or tend to be lacking in monitoring and control. Uh, I don't know. I don't know whether this is. I know that this is an issue across the board. So in a lot of programs or projects, uh, we we tend to okay. Here's the finished product, and then we'll leave it at that. And so, ideally there would be a kind of like a grace period where a grace period or a period where you where stakeholders would come back and have a look at the program and evaluate it and make adjustments as needed. However, that's something that we not just the government, but I think we as a society as a whole need to improve. I reckon. Yeah, cool. So the takeaway from that is that the programs are not flawed, but again, we need some we can still improve on its implementation, especially in the monitoring and control. And another benefit of this monitoring and control or evaluation monitoring and evaluation mechanism is that we can evaluate how effective we can evaluate and measure and evaluate how effective the programs and the plans are because if we only take short-term measurements to conduct short-term surveys, how's it going after 5 years, then we only have a portrait of what's going on over the 5 years of the project implementation, for example. But if we could do it periodically, 5 years, 10 years, 15, and so on, then we can see the changes because I think long-term periodic evaluations are very useful, especially when if it's pertaining a built structure or built environment. Most of the most infrastructure, most buildings, and most structures in generally have a 20 to 50 years lifespan. So it would make sense if we conduct a periodic survey for mid to long term in the mid to long term range, because again, that's the lifespan of these structures. So yeah, that's a good one there. For the for the presenting group, I'd like to ask. I know you showed us how the plans how different housing and settlement programs and plans have been integrated into, or they try to integrate it into the spatial planning documents and into mid and long term development plans, RPJP and RPJM. But can you tell me and tell us a little bit more how integrated is it? How integrated are these plans and how these housing and settlement plans are into the main planning documents? what I mean is, are these plans um, simply mentioned, or is there some degree of elaboration of these plans inside the planning documents themselves? Hang on. Um, did yeah, Sekar, please.
Sorry, sir, can you repeat the question because I think your voice is putus-putus.
Yeah, I was just about to ask whether I've made myself clear because there's a quite a bit of background noise and my connection is not that great at the moment. Um, can you come back to a couple of the earlier slides, please? Right, that one. There you go. Linkage of spatial plans and housing and settlement plans. Um, actually, no. Now that I saw this slide, but I wasn't quite sure. But now that I've seen this, I think this slide answers my question already. So I'm going to retract my question. Thank you very much for highlighting this. Um, this is exactly what I was about to ask. Actually, how the spatial plans and how the housing and settlement plans are integrated into one another. But yeah, so thank you very much for that. Sorry about that. You can ignore my previous question. Thank you. Does anybody else have a question or any comments regarding today's topic? Yes, Hatta.
So I don't know if I missed a part of the presentation, but I just wanted to ask. I think you guys explained a bit about RPKPP, Rencana Pembangunan Kawasan Permukiman Prioritas, and yeah, I just wanted to ask what are the parameters or what are the parameters to determine the priority settlements to yeah, that's my question. I just want to ask what kind of parameters are used to determine which settlements is part of the priority to be developed.
Thank you for that, Hatta. That is indeed a good question. What parameters or what criteria are used to determine the priorities of these plans and programs? Would the group or anyone in the class like to respond to that? Just to just to give the group a slight boost and a bit of a and to continue and to make sure that the discussion continues rolling. I had a look at. I'm going to paste the link in the chat box. I had a look here at the Directorate for housing development of the Ministry of Public Works, the Ministry of Public Works website, and with regards to the priority, housing, um, it the website only mentions the website only mentions the characteristics of the housing development or priority housing development plan, and it only details the output of the program, such as detailed engineering design and activity proceedings and profile of the priority area. However, it doesn't. It does not. It does not specifically detail. Um, it doesn't specifically detail the parameters as Hata asked, and I think this warrants a further investigation on our part. I think. This is something that we can look into together, perhaps even after today's session has ended. I'm thinking maybe we could set up a class forum, in my classroom, and we can perhaps continue the discussion there, unless one of you or some of you have found out what the parameters or what the criteria is for determining priority zones or priority areas are. Has anybody succeeded in finding the parameters or the criteria?
I'm afraid I haven't, sir.
I thought so. That's okay. I think this warrants a further investigation, as I mentioned, because this is quite an interesting finding, and it's a very interesting and in fact it's a very crucial question. It's a very crucial question to ask. So yeah, thank you for that. Does anybody else have any comments or questions with regards to today's topic, or it is all over the place at the moment? Okay. If there are no further questions from the class, I'd like to invite the presenting group to close their presentation section and perhaps deliver one or two words of acknowledgement to the class.
I think that's all from Group 7, and thank you for your very nice attention. And sorry for if we have any mistaken. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. No mistakes whatsoever. Thank you again, Group 7, for your for initiating today's discussion. And looks like we found a topic for our out of class discussion. And this little investigation that we are going to do, or that we will do, I think would result in very interesting findings. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone, for joining me today in housing and settlement, and thank you very much again for initiating the discussion. Thank you very much thank you very much to everyone who participated in the discussion and again, I'm lost for words. Oh, goodness me. Well, thanks overall, and I look forward to seeing you guys again next week. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Have a great day, everyone.